Hola, hola, hello, hello. Good morning to me in Santiago, Chile. It's 11:01, and good afternoon to my great guest, Mauritz Lotz. It's an honor to have you here today. Thanks for accepting the invitation, and I hope that we're going to have some fun exchanging ideas. And me, I'm going to learn a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. It's great to finally meet you and be here with you.
Great. Well, I should say that this contact happened thanks to Mr. Duncan Mackay, whom I interviewed a few weeks ago. And I've always admired Duncan for his amazing talent and creativity and his participations as well in very important projects and records of different artists that are very dear here to me and some people in Chile and everywhere in the world. Kate Bush, Alan Parsons, Eric Bachi, 10cc, etc. But now it's Mauritz Lotz's turn, who's an incredible man, an incredible talent that I must confess I just discovered when I went to listen to A Beautiful Madness, which is the record that you just made with, well, Duncan. Let me introduce you, Maurice, a little bit. You can correct me if there's anything that you think can be corrected. You are a Grammy Award-winning producer, composer, as well as a session musician, and you started playing music at a very early age, I guess 17 or thereabouts. You have several recordings on your CV, and your discography includes several interesting records that I could check. Between 1990, I would say, and 2026. Is that so? I have here, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I started, I picked up the guitar from the age of 10. And then my dad got me interested. And it was at the age of 17 that I actually left school and became a professional musician.
I see.
And I started doing freelance work, playing gigs with various bands, freelancing, and also got into recording fairly early, subsequently from that, at that time, either way. Just by default, having worked with a lot of artists on stage, they would sort of hear me play, and then I would get into doing some recordings for their albums, and then word of mouth kind of went from there, and I got into doing recording sessions for a living.
Right.
Yeah, so it was pretty much sort of early 80s from that, that era that I sort of stepped into the music industry as I suppose one would call a full-time musician. I suppose professionalism comes as you grow and you evolve in the process either way.
I have so please go ahead.
No, I was saying I'm fortunate to have done it like that.
Okay. Well, anyway, I have a list of albums that maybe those watching us today are going to be curious and try to check. I have some names like Six String Razor, Turning Point, Earth Tones, that's it, and the M&M Project with no less than Matthew Marie, is that right? And Steve Morse. I was surprised by that. And so there you have it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we covered a Steve Morse tune, so it was our adaptation with apologies to Mr. Steve Morse, of course.
Okay. Yeah. It's a kind of there are some kind of folky tracks like yeehaw and sort of that.
It was an interesting project, speaking of the M&M project, obviously just being obviously silly and punny about it, saying, well, Mathews and Mauritz, two M's, so we'll call it the M&M project. It was inspired. We actually got booked to play, prescribed to us some instrumental music for a launch of the new vehicle. I'm not going to sort of name the make of the vehicle for now, for maybe obvious reasons, either way. And so we enjoyed it so much, and that kind of inspired us to just do a little sideline project, which is actually more just fun and tongue-in-cheek. We didn't take it seriously at all.
It sounds like that. It sounds like that.
So it was more just having fun and just having a bit of comic relief, and hopefully people can see it in that light as well,
Yeah.
you know.
By the way, I didn't mean it. It sounds like not to take it seriously, but it sounds like you did have some fun. That's what I meant.
No,
Yeah.
definitely,
I
most definitely. Thank you.
I also have other titles like Kaleidoscopic, which sounds a little bit techno at times. Random. What's the name? Randomosity. Yeah, it's kind of heavier at times. Different landscapes, different mental landscapes to me. There's one I love, Mauritz, that it's Sacred Cycle, such a beautiful piece of work, and the chanting is fantastic. And you have also music for a ballet on Wings of Light, Dance of an Angel. I think it's only 3 tracks that I found. Yeah.
3 tracks, yeah.
And then yeah, go ahead.
Carry on if you want. Well, I mean, I suppose I could sort of elaborate a little bit about each of the albums if you're interested.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start at the beginning. 6-String Razor. I mean, by the time I recorded 6-String Razor, which is my debut solo album, it was in a sort of mid to late 80s, which was at the time very much influenced by the West Coast rock sound, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, those influences. I've always been a fan. I've been a fan of a lot of different guitar players, but among those were those guys. And then I was already doing a lot of session work, getting into producing, etc., etc. So I just saved up some money and thought I wanted to record some of my own music. And so it was actually meant to be a demo. What people actually listen to is a demo. I mean, technically it's the album, but it was intended to just be the demo. And then a friend of mine, unbeknownst to me, basically sent the demo, quote unquote, to a radio DJ, a popular radio station at the time. And they started playing it on radio, and there was a little bit of a sort of a tongue-in-cheek thing going on. Like, who is this guy? Who's the mystery guitar player kind of thing? And that caused a bit of a buzz. And the next thing I got a call from, at the time, Tusk Music, which was, at the time, I think division of, say, I think it was Warner Brothers or at that time or whatever. But yeah, it was a sort of side label of the company, and then they basically offered me a licensing deal because I financed the recording myself as well. So, and that's how my journey started, really doing my own albums. And then I had my band and we were doing gigs and I was having fun with all that. I had a fair amount of media support then because a lot of the DJs were rock music fans. So I was lucky enough to have people really supporting my music, even though it's not vocal, it wasn't mainstream, it wasn't anything that was supposedly radio friendly, in context of what was going on.
Yeah, I was going to say, Maurice, that if you allow me to, there's such a wide scope of styles, and I wasn't sure if I should mention him, but I did find some Satrianesque feeling in some tracks, but you have a wide range of styles, and as you say, it's not easy to pigeonhole any of what you've done so far. So please go ahead.
Thank you. I mean, I am just generally a lover of a lot of different kinds of music, a lot of genres, and when it comes to guitar playing in particular, I love different styles of playing. So hence probably the diversity on some of the albums. So after 6-String Razor, I went to LA for a while. I'm a big fan of Trevor Rabin from Yes, and
I was going. Yeah,
I got to meet him. We connected there, and I've been influenced by what he does for a long time. Either way, And then I joined a band in Los Angeles, but it didn't last too long. They were more interested in just writing songs at the time and not really performing. So I came back to South Africa after that, and then basically started working on my second album, which was Turning Point. And then I got back into doing sessions and freelance work and producing here in South Africa, and just carried on as I did before, basically, and just finished the second album. And at that time, things changed from Tusk Music's perspective, and I think they basically moved away and merged with a different company. So it felt like a right time. So I kind of went on my own. I just did a distribution deal for that album, and so on. And fast forwarding then to, I think what became Earth Tones was I was now already. I think just being in South Africa, I'm exposed to a lot of African style of music, a lot of world music by default. At that time, I was working with quite a lot of the African artists, which was really a lot of fun, learning the styles and learning the music. And so it became quite an influence. So Earth Tones was kind of almost a natural progression for me musically to move into more world music driven sounds and ideas. And Earth Tones, obviously being some acoustic guitar, and I was into people like Deep Forest and electronic music at the same time. Afro Celt sound system. I don't know if you know them.
Marvelous, yes.
And, I was a fan of that kind of music, so I tried to sort of blend those influences with Earth Tones, which you had was mostly as an acoustic album, but with electronic and world sounds, soundscapes as such, And then there was the Eminem project, which was kind of almost just a sort of an ad break for me, for lack of better analogy, for fun. And and then I moved. It seemed to sort of happen every couple of years in my life where I feel I needed to take a snapshot of where I am with my music and what I wanted to say, whether it be instrumentally or not. So I think all the albums are sort of generally a couple of years apart each time, release them. So, and then Kaleidoscopic was more when I moved closer to cinematic music and kind of got into that. So there's a strong cinematic influence combined with all sort of things that I was, kind of doing and enjoying at the time. So I feel Kaleidoscopic became an album for me personally. People are welcome to enjoy it in their own way if they do. So, but my personal sort of feeling about it was that it was the closest sort of reflection of, I think, where a lot of my influences and love for different genres, especially cinematic music, sort of became a little bit more audible in the soundscape.
And if you allow me to go back a few seconds from what you were saying, you mentioned Afro Celt sound system that I discovered them by the songs that Real World Studios published on a CD, which is some sort of it's a fantastic project. And then you possibly are going to move on to Sacred Cycle now, Mauritz?
After Kaleidoscopic,
randomosity,
I think, randomosity happened during COVID. So my philosophy at the time was, when lockdown happened for everybody and the whole world kind of almost seemed to come to a standstill, I think, was that there is no present like the time. I kind of kept saying that to me. And then I thought, well, I've always wanted to do certain things. So I ended up exploring writing more classical music. I wrote a violin concerto and a concerto for cello and orchestra during the first couple of weeks of lockdown at that year. And then a lot of things, I kind of went into it almost, I sort of accelerated into a very creative space, and which I'm very grateful for. Having done, finishing the concertos, I felt like I was on the roll, and the muse was kind to me at the time, and I kind of explored other ideas. I got a call from uh, someone who I haven't really seen for a long time, which I think I worked with on an album
Mm-hmm.
a few years ago. And she's an artist. She's a very good painter. And then she asked me if I could write music for an art exhibition that she wants to do that was based on a novel that she wrote. So it became sort of a multi-layered project at that time. And then I wrote music that became part of the ballet which you mentioned earlier.
Uh-huh.
While that was happening, another friend of mine who was an orchestra conductor, he lives in Germany at the moment. His name is Gerben Groten. He's an incredible musician, a really, really, really talented conductor. Yeah, I think he just recently conducted the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra as well. So he's really amazing. He's a big inspiration to me. And him playing drums and percussion. He's a absolutely master orchestra percussionist, and he plays very good drums as well. Anyway, he basically phoned me during lockdown, during this COVID time, saying he's frustrated because he couldn't conduct. The orchestras couldn't play, people couldn't go anywhere, all that. And he was frustrated as a musician, so he wanted to kind of let loose and have some fun in a studio on his own. So he asked me if I had some ideas that I could set him that he could just jam some drums to. And then I said to him, well, I only have some orchestra pieces on my archive of stuff that I've been composing, but I will see what I can do. So I ended up taking the guitar and just playing to a click track some ideas and send it to him so he can have his fun. And that basically evolved into randomosity. So those ideas became sort of, evolutions of those core ideas that was initially intended for him to just have fun with. But then we had some momentum with that process, and then I ended up completing the randomosity album. And then so I did most of it, which I think the reason that feels a little different to me in comparison was I did it differently by default, whereas to previous albums, it sort of had a different way of, the music had a different way of evolving. Where with randomosity in particular, I just had the guitar and the click track. I just had the tempo and the guitar. So I had to make sure whatever I was doing the guitar, I didn't think too much in terms of what the bigger picture you needed to be. I wanted to make sure the guitar ideas made sense. And that to me felt a little different and in some way a little bit more refreshing to my approach to the previous album.
If you allow me to say, Mauritz, if you allow me to say, I was checking randomosity, and I sensed a heavier touch, like possibly reflecting the mental state you and everyone were in, like with a certain degree of fear, uncertainty, and unpredictability. And that's, I think, very well captured in the sounds of that particular album.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was definitely an uncertainty, and I'm always hoping to be a little bit unpredictable about what I do.
Yeah.
I think especially with instrumental music, I think, there's space for everything in every style and every type of music, either way. And I don't discriminate against those, or anything else. But for me, I always find that the music I gravitate to when I listen to music for just enjoyment or inspiration, at the end of the day, I listen to stuff that normally is a little less predictable. And sometimes for me, prog rock, for argument's sake, is less predictable. There's progression, there is there are musical ideas that are engaging to the listener.
Certainly, no, but I meant, Maurice, I meant the unpredictability of the situation back at that in those days. We didn't know where everything was going. So yeah, of course, unpredictability is something healthy in music. To have freedom and go whenever you feel to go next. Yeah, please.
Definitely. But so yeah, I mean, I feel, I suppose, content with the result with Randomosity, you know. And then focused more on the music that had more of a cinematic feel, sound, and with no guitar in it, which became the ballet at a later stage, because a friend of mine heard the music and said, well, why don't we pitch it as a ballet? So we approached some people in Cape Town. This happened 2 years ago, actually, where I had a meeting with a dance company and the Cape Town Ballet. And a friend of mine helped me, with the presentation thereof and so on. And so they heard the music and said, well, let's do it. So I was very lucky and fortunate, shall I say, and happy to have the project coming to fruition through a ballet, you know. And some of the music is not in the ballet itself. The music that I wrote for the art exhibition, because it was taken for that project that became more of a ballet angle, I suppose, if that makes any sense. You know?
Now, obviously, I think the latest collaboration or the latest name we have on your discography is the one with Duncan Mackay, A Beautiful Madness from 2026, a few months ago. Is that right?
Yes.
And yes.
I mean, I can honestly say that I think working with Duncan on this project has been with a lot of respect and love to everybody that I know and work with. You know, it was probably one of the best, if not the best, collaboration I've ever done in my life or my career. You know, if I have to really compare, and I mean that with a lot of respect to everybody, you know, and everything. Just because of the freedom that I felt instantly was available to both Duncan and myself to just explore and let the music kind of evolve in the way that we felt good about, you know. So.
And how did the opportunity to collaborate with this legendary star of progressive rock on the album happen?
I've always. Sorry, am I interrupting you?
No, you're not at all. No, this is a continuum. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. No, well, I've known for a long time that Duncan lived in Cape Town, but I've never met him. Other musicians would tell me about him, and I kind of knew he was the 10cc guy, as some would say, you know. And then I wasn't that familiar with a lot of what he was up to in his career until much later when we finally got to meet and I got to know him better. But needless to say, I was always very curious about who he was and what he was about, other than what I knew. So a friend of mine who's also a recording engineer, he also lives here in Cape Town. I live in Cape Town now, but it was before I came down. I've been in Cape Town for 3 years now. And before then, I've used to visit Cape Town on a fairly regular basis for work, coming from Joburg. And anyway, I visited my friend who's a recording engineer, and we often listened to music together. And I played him a little bit of the Kaleidoscopic album that day, which you hadn't heard yet. So, and he said, well, while we was listening, say, you know, Duncan should hear this stuff. So I thought, well, that will be fantastic. I mean, obviously, I would be very keen on that. And then he said, well, let's phone him. So right there and then we phone him, we make an appointment, we come and the next day, my friend and I came and visited Duncan right here in the studio where I'm sitting now. And when I met Duncan in person, it was like, what happened? Where have you been all my life, kind of thing. You know? I mean, we just hit it off. You know, we were speaking the same language, musically, and really being excited about ideas. So I was very, very happy to meet him that day. So I went back to Joburg at the time. It was before I moved down. And then I think a couple of days or a week or so later, Duncan phoned me and said, look, we've got this track that he needs some guitar on. And can you do some stuff for me? Let's work together, And so I did. I sent him. He was very happy. He liked it very much. And then the next thing, I think also within a very relative short space of time, probably a week or two, he phones me again, Duncan, and he says to me, look, do you want to join a band? And I was laughing, thinking, well, okay, this would be interesting at this stage of my life to join a band of sorts. And the next thing, I was on a Skype call with Duncan and Phil from Fluence. And I got to meet online, Phil and everybody. And so then, I find myself joining Fluence unofficially or officially at the time. And so they would send me tracks and I would add some guitar, being the guitar player in the band now. So, and that was a lot of fun. And then whilst that was going on, in between all of that, Duncan also said to me, look, with Fluence, recording process was also very much very much a staggered process because everybody had schedules and different things going on different times, so it would take a long time. So we just I think I can't recall if it was Duncan. I think it was Duncan that said we should do something else together, and then it was a no-brainer for me, No, I didn't need any conversing. So I said, well, I'm in, let's do it. I will make time for it. So while I was still in Joburg, just before I moved down that year, I started, with sending Duncan some small ideas and concepts that we could develop and work on. And then that became the sort of starting point and basis for A Beautiful Madness.
So, Mauritz, sorry, let me ask you, you were not familiar with the band Fluence before you met Duncan and all that?
Unfortunately not,
Okay,
I've learned so much from Duncan and obviously, he has great stories to tell because, I grew up with the things that he was actually involved in,
Sure.
like Alan Parsons' project,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, TNCC, Kate Bush. I was very familiar with the music, having listened to it on radio or on vinyl when I was at school.
Wow.
So I was kind of, it was a kind of sort of combination of a jaw-dropping experience for me to kind of find out, the secrets that I didn't know about Duncan. So, secrets being mentioned
have collaborator, have fun, so to speak.
Yeah. So it was really lovely, and I really appreciated working with Duncan, him coming from that era, because I also grew up with that music. I grew up listening to Yes, Genesis, Uriah Heep maybe, or Deep Purple, or Pink Floyd, or there were so many bands that I think, I was familiar with some of the Camel stuff, or I knew of Budgie, Strawbs became later as well at some point, and I was lucky enough to work with them for a while at sort of semi-recently anyway. But so it was almost like things that I wouldn't have even dreamed of or imagined when I was at school. Suddenly I'm in this world with Duncan and really exploring things with such freedom and creativity, which is really rewarding.
Now, how did you divide the creative process? Did you write demos together in the studio? Did you exchange ideas remotely? Because two driving forces that have been on different territories, so to speak, must be something very simple.
I think what made it simple was that we both were feeling and thinking alike about how we wanted to do it. It was about the journey rather than the destination. It sounds very cliche perhaps, but it was definitely, I think that we wanted to do it for fun and we wanted to please ourselves. We didn't think of who was going to like it or hopefully who's going to listen to it. Obviously, you always consider that people would like to listen to it and hopefully enjoy it and, get, some sort of reward listening to the music. Um, but the fundamental point of departure and Golden Rule was just we wanted to have fun and please ourselves doing it. We did pretty much most of it, if not all of it, remotely. We would send things back and forth to each other, and then once I moved down to Cape Town, I would come here and sit with him in the studio, and we would discuss what we've done and where we are with it, and then to really just talk about the creative potential of what we're busy with and where we think it could be going. And so it was, that's what I'm saying. It being the type of collaborative experience that I'm, mentioned earlier, made it so easy and so much fun. It's like it's a rare thing to have. Where there was no real conflict. It's just like we were in the same lane most of the time, if not all the time. And he was very gracious in allowing me that freedom as well. And equally, I wanted to. I mean, obviously, respecting him for who he is and what he does. It was really easy to do in a sense. So
Yeah.
ironically, we never really played together. We just kind of remotely send ideas, get together, discuss, and move. And it always surprised me. He would always surprise me. And hopefully, sometimes I think I surprised him because he would receive my ideas and he would turn them upside down. And that would excite me because I always think, okay, well, it doesn't have to be the way I think or the way I sort of envision things all the time. As long as the music remains and it speaks and it has integrity, it can go wherever it needs to go. And so that became an exciting part of the collaboration, just being surprised by what he's doing with my ideas and vice versa.
And were you familiar? Because I got to know Duncan with a magnificent score, the album from 1977, I guess it is, a year before Wuthering Heights by Kate Bush, and then Chimera, which I only recently discovered, which is a crazy a record and very amazing to hear. Did you have the chance to listen to his music before meeting and working with him?
I did go onto some of the platforms to kind of find things about it. So yes, I did go and listen along the way. I think I'm still discovering some of the stuff, because I think the algorithm sort of pushes things my way, listening to music anyway. So I stumble onto things that I either haven't heard perhaps or may have, listened to at some point, but not too recent. But yeah, but it made a lot of sense, and I know Duncan refers to the track Looking Back on the Beautiful Madness album as some quotes from, his previous work. And it kind of made sense to me then. It's sort of only when I listened to that again, it kind of, okay, so, that's it's a lovely sort of, shout out to what he was up to previously, But I think it's just amazing to hear him play. He's playing on both Chimera and Score for me was like just it's just amazing. It's jaw-droppingly good. It's wonderful.
It is. Yeah, well, maybe Beautiful Madness in a way could refer to my own guess to the complexity of the creativity in the technical aspect and the instrumental music in a digital era as well. You have so many chances and possibilities that I'm saying it not being a musician. I suppose that you have so many choices, so many possibilities that maybe you are about to get mad before you decide what to come up with. And what you came up in the end with is a very beautiful, really, I say it from the bottom of my heart, is very impressive, cinematic, involving music. I really love the album, and we were discussing by email I wish that it becomes a physical, that we can count on a physical version of the album one day. I'm more of the old era, you know. Behind me, you have a few samples. Yeah, I like to
I
grab
see, it
music.
looks impressive. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
good.
I don't want to make promises I can't keep, but I've certainly made, Duncan and myself have spoken about this a few times, where I know I want to address the vinyl issue with the record label and say, look, can we do an exclusive print, at least for people like yourself that are really, really, really strong fans of the genre, let alone hopefully the album, you know?
And how strong is vinyl these days? Well, it is right. It became strong again as a format. Vinyl records. I don't think the quality is the same as we used to have in the golden era, and the prices have gone up, rocketed to the sky.
Yeah.
But there are still people that love, especially the younger generation, that love the artifact, the boxes, the remaster things.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I hope that we can see at least a CD one day. Now, regarding, is there a track that you are particularly in love with from Beautiful Badness? One that meant particular, not difficulty, but hard work, or that you really enjoyed, making the final version of it? Because I suppose that in an album of 10, 12 songs or pieces, there are always some of them that are like, they come more like easily, they happen more easily between two or more
Yeah.
artists. Would you point out any of the tracks on Beautiful Badness that you think is special?
Okay, for me, the title track, I know that I think it's also Duncan's favorite. Now, I favor the title track for, I favor two tracks for what it's worth. It's hard to single out one in particular, but if I have to choose, I would say at best I will choose two. I mean, this is not negating the fact that the others were a lot of fun and interesting for me to work on creatively. But I think from a sentiment point of view, the first, the title track was kind of the first, that it was the first idea that we started developing for the project. So I have there's a lot of sentimental value for me in the making of the track. The one that I enjoy is Shibumi, actually, because equally, but for different reasons. Because I think, and I hope perhaps that comes across in a way, I mean, it doesn't have to be, it can be different for everybody or anybody. But for me, Shibumi had a sort of a sense of mystery about it, for lack of better words, I suppose, of description. I find that, and I, the the reason I'm mentioning it as well is because I don't do a lot of singing by default. I would do some backing vocal work when I play live or whatever. So, and Duncan, I think also not really at the time when we sort of met each other, he wasn't really, I think very familiar with all the things that I was up to at the time. We kind of met, and it was kind of, we didn't have any assumptions or preconceived ideas or expectations. We were just two musicians, I suppose, enjoying each other's company and ideas. And which is why it probably felt so natural to go there with the album, So the reason to get back to Shibumi, I've always enjoyed, and I think Shibumi is also a little bit a reflection of some of my world music influence, with the chanting. And so I sort of tried to add vocal textures to the project at some point when we were busy exchanging ideas. And then that sort of evolved into some of the vocal parts getting a little bit more focus, and Duncan being okay with that, and I was surprised because, sometimes you kind of feel quite insecure about your singing or it's not. So either way, I really appreciated Duncan's sort of support and idea of, well, let's give it a shot, whatever makes the music, speak in some way. So, and I think him being objective about things that I do in some way also helped me kind of get more confidence and feel more secure with the vocal parts and the vocal textures on the album. So that became more of a thing to sometimes explore. If we get stuck with an instrumental idea or whatever, we would suggest or talk about, what does this mean? What does this need? Do we need a lyric? Do we need textures or whatever? So we would really discuss every single aspect of the sound and the arrangement or the concept, in detail with each other. And he was very comfortable with me adding these vocal textures, which I was really happy about. So I'm glad I could explore them. So that to me is the sense of mystery fundamentally, and the idea of Shabumi was probably, I think, the one where I sort of started adding vocal textures first. Even though we worked on Beautiful Madness title track already, I think my first sort of vocal texture ideas came with Shabumi.
By the way, let me add that Shabumi comes from Japanese, which is an interesting term.
Yeah.
I think it's related to some sort of elegant way of doing things without much effort. Is that so?
I think so. I'm not an expert on the language vernacular, but I did ask Duncan about it, and it seemed apparently it's based on a book as well. He actually gave me a copy of the book. There's a book with the title of Shabumi. I have it here. I can't tell you now exactly who the author is, but yeah. It was interesting. And I kind of like the idea that it means that, because I think in some cases for me, I felt that the project needed to also evolve into something hopefully elegant, or at least a sonic artwork of sorts, and so for me there was good reason and good motivation for that title.
Well, interesting. If you allow me to go back in time, Mauritz, we are with Mauritz Lotz, a great musician from South Africa, Cape Town, and that is related to, as he has been explaining, related to Duncan Mackay's latest work, Beautiful Madness. Now, you really have an amazing curriculum working with other people. Sorry, if you allow me to mention, some of the people you worked for are no less than Phil Manzanera, David Gilmour, Chris de Burgh, Leo Sea, Shawn Phillips, whom I discovered recently. What an amazing artist he is. And I'm not sure how to say this, Mfali Kayoute. That's the guy from Afro sound system. People from the Snarky Puppy project, Dave Mathews, wow, Lokua, Kanza, the Crash Test Dummies, and this is special to me because her song Pata Pata was released in Chile on a single record, Miriam Makeba.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, she also came.
I'm getting goosebumps as you saying that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, please carry on.
She visited Chile, specifically the Song Festival in Viña del Mar, which is a legendary festival. It used to be, and she came here back in 1972, I guess, long time ago. And I also know that you have, I don't know, I wanted to ask you about all these people you have worked with. How has this experience enhanced your own art, crafts, and creativity, in studio or on stage?
Okay, I think different people, different, inspirations, I guess. I would say I was fortunate enough. Let me start maybe with Phil Manzanera, and we haven't really met in person. I think we met online once with a project that I was busy doing. But I sort of fell into the project there was a project called the Liberation Project.
Okay.
Which was done uh, by some friends of mine, colleagues of mine in Johannesburg, that initiated this liberation project with Phil. It's really about liberation songs, it's songs that made us free. So obviously with South Africa and Africa being very relevant in that context, and obviously other parts of the world. So, but a lot of collaboration happened between Phil and people in Italy, because one of my colleague friends is Italian, so he had a lot of connections there. Now, this all happened kind of online or via online, where I was approached by uh, my friends to say, asking me, say, look, can you mix this album? They were liking it, how I was mixing other things at the time. And I said, but of course, and then by default, I sort of really started with the process, because then I would get files from Italy, I would get files from Phil, I would get files from whoever. So it was really a remote process of me, consolidating the ideas and the songs, and then also kind of indirectly arranging and producing the material for that project. So that has been my experience with Phil. So we haven't really engaged, in real time a lot. It was mostly over that time for that project, which I really appreciated. But I mean, I knew who Phil was. I loved his work with David Gilmour. I love his work with Roxy Music. So for me, it was just a privilege to be able to work with his musical ideas and really, engage from a musical perspective. And I suppose if I move forward to, and Fale is also a really, for me, wonderful experience, because I met Fale a few times. He was out in South Africa doing William Kentridge's project. At the time, I met him by chance, also through a colleague of mine who was busy working on another concept, which is a world music concept album called the Uptown Rhythm Collective, which was also collaborative. And then I didn't even know at the time that it was of Infali's involvement at the time, because I was already a fan of Afro system. So it was a no-brainer for me when I met Infali the one day in Johannesburg while he was here. And then, being involved with the Rhythm Collective project, I started working, and then Infali enjoyed me. So I ended up producing some his songs for his album. And we've been in touch ever since, on and off, been, in contact, which has really been fun. I see him every now and then when he comes out with the WOMAD, festival that happens here in Cape Town now. So loving world music has just been, a bonus for me, working with someone like Nfali. And he's an incredible singer and an incredible kora player. If you listen to the Afrikaans stuff, you can hear him. And, and Lokua Kanza I met through Miriam Makeba, actually. It was even most of these things happened when I think during or after 1994, when democracy came to South Africa. And there was this influx of international musicians and artists that would come in. And at the time, I was very much busy doing a lot of freelance work in studios, either playing or producing, perhaps. So I was in the mix of things, no pun intended, over that time. So it was, I didn't really get to know Lokua Kanza, but I can tell you a short story this time. I remember working with Miriam on the Homeland album, and the producer called me the one day. I was in another studio doing something else, and it was after I finished my recordings with Miriam, and then the producer phones me and says, look, we're doing a photo shoot for the album for everybody that was involved in the project, so would you come and, bring your guitar, we're going to do a quick photo moment with you, with everybody else. So I excused myself from the session I was at the time, and then rushed to the studio across Joburg to just be in time for the photo shoot. And the next thing I arrived at the studio, and there was Lokua Kanza. So essentially, Lokua Kanza worked on the Homeland album, so it was more of an indirect experience for me. But there was a magical moment which I always refer to, which is why I'm telling you the story. Um, it was magical for me, all I can say. It was meaningful because we were waiting for the photographers to kind of finish setting up the lighting for the photo shoot. And then me and Lokua sat in the control room in the studio that day. And we both started chatting because we both worked on the album with Miriam, and it was wonderful. And the next thing, I have my guitar with me. Lokua has his acoustic guitar with me. We start playing together. And it was like time stood still for me. It was this magical moment. It was like it lasted probably 15 or 20 minutes max, where you could just feel like time stood still where we just had this magical jam together. So I've always treasured that experience, with people that you don't necessarily always know very well, but common language is music, and common ground is music. And, so it's always been my experience, or at least most of the time, that even at the most unassuming moments and times, you would have these kind of encounters with people and have magical moments, and that I carry that with me along. With Dave Mathews was also interesting because I was working a lot with Masekela in studio also over that time, and Dave Mathews, he visited South Africa, and I just got a call. I mean, I was just playing as a session player, and at the time, unbeknownst to me, often you get a call. People don't really tell you what you're up to, unless, it does sometimes get communicated to you, I suppose, beforehand. But often, if you're a session player, either the producer, or if the artist or the record company doesn't phone you, a producer would phone you, you would arrive, and you're not really sure what's going on until you get there. And this was kind of that type of scenario where I arrived at the studio, and the next thing, I hear Dave Mathews laying down tracks for the Everyday album, so, and I think those are just demos. So I don't think any of that ended up on the actual album. So, I'm nowhere near it. But it was just an interesting surprise to kind of be in studio, and there I'm, doing demo recordings on Dave Mathews material, So all these sort of unassuming moments. Shawn Phillips happened in a similar way, where Shawn was visiting South Africa in the late 80s or early 90s. Well, it was out. I think it was early 90s. And I knew of Second Contribution. I mean, I knew kind of, I used to see the cover. It had the long hair and the 12-string guitar, and all that, and I would sort of recognize one or two songs, I guess. I wasn't really following him as an artist at the time. But, a friend of mine phoned me and said, look, Shawn is in Joburg. He's actually doing a small tour just on his own. But, I think he's the record company who distributed his music at the time was, I think, Gallo. And they were going to do a little presentation for him to present him with, I think it was a platinum or album or something for the albums that he's sold over the years, being the success story that he was. And it would be nice if you could just come in as a guitar player and just play along with him, So I thought, well, okay, I don't really know his music that well, but I'm keen to try. So, and again, here I end up at Gallo offices performing with Shawn Phillips, and he loved it and I loved it, and we had such chemistry. Right then, he said to me, look, do you want to do the tour with me?
Sorry, when was that, Maurice? When was that?
So that was early 90s. It was close to 94. It was at the time there was, I think it might have been pre-94, shortly before, because there was at the time quite a lot of turbulence politically in the country. So with the changeover, you know, uh, so yeah, it was an interesting time. But you know, I was lucky enough to have that experience, and then I ended up touring the country with Shawn, you know, and we really connected. I think I worked with him on future on projects subsequently after that for a while, on and off anyway. And so all these things, you know, I mean, I use them as examples, you know,
Yeah.
as how you just hopefully made fortunately you're at the right place, or you know someone
Yeah.
that may have goodwill and good heart to recommend you, and you end up working with someone that you really admire, you know.
Yeah, let me just mention, Moritz, that the big opportunity that I had here in Santiago, Chile, back between 89 and 96 to become the music director of Future FM, totally special and different radio station, and where I could play Afro Celt sounds, Peter Gabriel, Dead Can Dance, fusion jazz, electronic music. So it was an alternative station. And now that we were talking about Dave Mathews, there's one song in particular that I remember having played, which is Dancing Nancy's from this great album. Maybe you're familiar with that, Under the Table and Dreaming. It's a very nice album. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, and I also wanted to share a rare picture of Miriam Makeba, where she came, she came here back in '72, and this is a picture with the president back then, Allende, who he was the president until 1973, before the military coup. Yeah, it's a very old picture, and that's the same year. This must have been the same days when she played the song festival in Viña del Mar. Now, I don't want to. Yeah, go ahead.
No. I'm listening. Sorry.
Okay,
You want to
yeah.
ask?
Yeah, no, I have several other points that I'd like to try to cover. And this one of them is I've been watching this fantastic collaboration you did with Nessun Dorma from the Turandot opera by Giacomo Puccini back in 2023 with Lucanio Moyake, that's the singer, I guess, at the Artscape Opera in Cape Town. That's an amazing version of the aria, which I think is very popular among opera lovers and some common people like myself.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is a great.
I personally think it's a beautiful rock ballad.
It
You know,
is. It is.
it
Yeah.
is.
You know,
If you
that's
really
the
look at the melodies, it's really amazingly. It's a beautiful piece of music.
Now, I don't like all the things that are transferred from rock into a symphonic context. Really, I
Yeah.
must be very honest. I have heard some arrangements for music by Jethro Tull, Genesis, and I don't know, Pink Floyd, and I don't think all of that really works well in my own perception. I don't know what yours is, but this was a very special thing. Now, you have, I must mention, being a Grammy Award winner. You participated in projects such as Winds of Samsara, and
Yes.
yeah, how do these awards and recognitions enriches or inspires you, your motivation and enthusiasm? How meaningful? Well, I suppose they are very meaningful. After all, they are an award. Any recollections on that?
On the Grammys in particular, I've been on a journey with Verticillum on the flautist, which he was basically his projects from his first project, which I produced or co-produced with him back in the day. I can't remember exactly the year, but it was I think 2 albums before Winds of Samsara.
Okay.
I think the album was entitled Color or something like that. And so we've been, on a journey together, with each of his projects, with me either co-producing or arranging, his material or some of it, and so on. So he's had an interesting journey. And I remember on I think it was on the Language of Love album, or that album After Color. With apologies to Vota, I'm not sure if I'm getting the titles correctly, but I think, yeah, I flew out to Los Angeles and met Vota in Los Angeles. He was busy doing final touches to a new project, and that became part of that became the Winds of Sahara. Subsequently he met Ricky Cash, and I remember at that time he was saying, well, he would like to enter for the Grammys and so on. So me being involved as a co-producer as such, by default became involved. I became a voting member for the Recording Academy. So, and I must say I enjoy every year. Voting for the Grammys, participating in it, because you discover so much every year. You discover what is new. You discover what's going on in other parts of the world that you would normally maybe be aware of. So all in all, for me, it's a very rewarding experience. So I'm just grateful to have been somehow being involved with Vertus projects. And the more recent one, Treveni, was the one. We did some of the recordings in New York about a year or two ago, and it was a collaborative project with some other artists. And I got to sort of co-write some of the material as well as co-produce and so on. So it's always been a learning experience for me, working with different people, different instrumentalists, and how they think, how they sort of ideas form along the way. It's really a very stimulating sort of environment to be in. So, but yeah, the award itself, I don't really chase it. I think I'm just grateful to, if for me, a reward is bonus if you do get one, and for me, the journey is really at the end of the day on the experience of, hopefully creating something of significance or meaning to to yourself and others, at the end of the day. It's really where the core of it lies for me.
Well, before we go on, I'd like to invite those who are watching us. Maybe you can give a like to the video, and if you like this video, you might check the previous interviews I've done on my channel on headphones. Maybe you could subscribe in a few seconds. Well, a few more things. Several South African stars have shared the stage and the studio with you, or vice versa. Hugh Masekela, Lucky Dubé, I don't know, I'm not sure about the pronunciation, Mango Groove. Miriam Makeba, we already mentioned. I don't know how to say this, Zanzi Youth Choir and Grammy winners.
Zanzi Youth Choir.
Yeah. How does it feel to unite forces with artists from your own land? It must be very meaningful after all, but it's something that only somebody South African can explain. I can only try to understand that.
Yeah, it's a little tricky to answer in a way, I think, without trying to sound, sort of loosely about it, I suppose. I think the fundamental thing is that you realize after some time, if your expression is music and you fundamentally share music as a common language, where I think I've been lucky enough to be in, then I think you realize where exactly that commonality lies, and that it's actually a safe place to be, especially if there are, if you have a turbulent situation surrounding your country, which for obvious reasons was there for quite some time, So for me, it's always been, I will go as far as to say, I think what I'm trying to say is, after a while, without realizing, I think the South Africanism, if you can really call it that, really gets under your skin, no pun intended. So, regardless of, color, cultural differences, etc., etc., I sort of feel that, because my experiences generally have been through music, where music has become faceless in a way. You look past the fact that whoever's coming from where, the common goal and the common idea, or the is unified in music, and then that becomes a very, for me, coming from an Afrikaans background, especially also from the other side of the coin, really became something to behold and something to treasure, where you can really, you know, appreciate the diversity, the unity in the diversity, and also the resilience. I mean, so it's, South Africa is rich in talent and culture. I mean, I know it may sound cheesy, but I mean, it's really, until such time you encounter, this environment, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of grit, and there's a lot of uh, gravitas, for lack of a better description, that happens in an environment, that is so diverse. And so yeah, there are so many dynamics that one can suppose either zone in on or out with, but my experience has really been exceptionally positive and mostly through music, which I really do appreciate. So whether it be for with a Lucky Dube or a Hugh Masekela or whatever, again, you would arrive in a controlled environment, i.e., a studio. Sometimes it would be on stage, perhaps, but you know, you leave all the stuff behind. You say, here we here, we shake hands, we play music together, and more than often, if not all, every time, some magic happens. And it's almost this dream idealistic scenario that you want to, you want to sort of, you want to bathe in it, for as long as you can, and yes, you develop friendships, you have deeper relationships with people along the way, so you end up doing more things with them, and so on and so on. But the environment is still fundamentally diverse and rich in ideas, and you know the dynamic is just, it's very difficult to just look at the surface and say, well, or it. You have to really become part of the process to really appreciate on some level, I think, the the deep dynamic of what is happening here, on many levels. I don't know if that makes any sense right now, but I don't even know if I'm answering your question accurately, but yeah, so it's just an amazing experience, and I'm really grateful for that, and it becomes, just even if you think music pragmatically, I would always say to artists, if it's, an African artist, I get to work with them in the studio or something, I would always say, play me what you guys play. I want to learn. I want to gain insight. I want to enjoy the richness of whatever this place, this environment has to offer, and hopefully, respectfully, just be able to, express myself and express those influences.
Now, I'd like to show you an image, share an image with you that I'm sure might bring some story maybe, and it's this one. I hope. Sorry, that's not the one. The newspaper is going to find it okay, the Maverick Insider, and this is the image of this man that is a big talent.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if you can tell us anything about this very important man.
I didn't really get to work with him, unfortunately. Yeah, so I wish I could say more about it. I think we were like passing ships. I would definitely see him on stage, at some festivals and things like that. I know that if there's any, I mean, if I may mention this, I was with Mango Groove at the time with Nelson Mandela's inauguration concert.
Okay.
And I know that Abraham was there as well. So, I mean, we did share the same environment, but I never really engaged with him, directly or on a musical level. I've always known of him, and I know he's part of the tapestry here. to say the least. So um, I think there are a handful of people that I think if I had a wish list, I would say yes. Well, there were some people that I would have loved to engage with and have creative time with, so to speak. I think it would have been really something special to behold for me, personally. But I think just for whatever reasons, you know, uh, you don't get to work with absolutely everybody, I guess.
Yeah.
So but it's nice to know that you were in that world in some way, where that even if you didn't really engage with each other directly all the time, or at times, either way.
Now you had the opportunity to be on the same stage as the Rolling Stones have, Sting, Eric Clapton, Roberta, Flack, even the Bee Gees. Do you have any impression or anecdotes you could want to share with us? Maybe your ideas of some of these artists and how they changed your way of, I don't know,
It was
listening to them?
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose there are a few things that one can mention, but in general, I was, I mean, at the time, I think, let's start as maybe in one, I don't want to go into too much detail on each one, but, say with the Rolling Stones, it was quite interesting. I think they were doing the Voodoo Lounge tour, and they came to South Africa and they played Ellis Park, and which is obviously the big stadium, rugby stadium that we have in Johannesburg. And I was with Mango Groove at the time, so we opened for the Rolling Stones that evening, and it was just incredible. I mean, what I can say about this is, this experience on a tangible level, the magnitude of such a production was just, again, a jaw-dropping experience for me. We arrived there early in the day, and they were still busy finalizing the setup on the stage and everything. But just to see the crew, the entourage that ran the production itself on a technical level was just something else to behold. Obviously, performing in front of 80,000 people plus, or I don't know how many were there. It was full at the time. It's really an adrenaline rush, and I nearly got to speak to Keith Richards. He was busy doing with a television interview backstage when we finished our set, and I just walked straight past him. I think, oh, I was so tempted to interrupt him and be a completely disruptive.
1 second.
Fan
Yeah.
saying,
Those
hey,
are the 1 second
but,
decisions. Should I do it or should I not? Yeah.
Exactly. And unfortunately, I don't know if I say regrettably, but I suppose in some way I feel better for not doing it and not really, being a over fan and interrupting whatever he was busy doing. But we got to meet the band. They had extra musicians on stage with them. So we didn't really engage too much with Keith and Mick and those guys. But with the session musicians that were touring with them, they were very open and friendly. So we had a great time. We met, before we even started playing and so on. We could spend time backstage and really, have, chat about just nothings and somethings, as fellow musicians. At the time of Sting was doing his 10 Summoners Tales tour. He played Sun City. I actually bought tickets for that show. So I went and saw the show. I was in the audience. And then he stayed for a week because the week after that was the same radio station that actually played my music when I released my first album, Radio 5 at the time. They did like a yearly concert at Ellis Park as well. And they had a lot of international acts there. I think Joan Armour Trading, Sting, Midnight Oil, Roxy. I think there were a lot of people from different parts of the world that came and performed there that day. I was there with PJ Powers and another band. Afrikaans band. So it was a very diverse day. And so I got to play early in the day with the Afrikaans band, and then I had to wait for when the next slot happened, where I also needed to go on stage with PJ Powers. And then so Sting and his band arrived that day. So I got to meet some of Sting's band. I had a wonderful time spending time with Dominic Miller.
Yes.
And it was lovely to talk to, a very gentle person and so on. So, and we just exchanged, music talk about, so how's the recording scene in the UK, and how is it in Joburg, so, but it was a wonderful time. I really appreciated that. And yeah, so I could, when Sting went on stage, I could stand backstage while he was playing, which was a nice, different perspective to have.
The crowd
Also,
roar, yeah.
mm, you know, interesting enough with uh, you know, with the Bee Gees. I don't know if you mentioned Bee Gees, but
I did, yeah.
or Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton also came out. He played Swaziland that same year. So I was with PJ Powers band at the time. So we were played earlier in the day. So again, I was backstage when Eric went on to his. And then again, I think it was a week or two after that, Eric, I think, did like a tour of some African countries. So from there, I think Eric went to Mozambique. And at that particular show was I think that was the first time that I think I played in front of 80,000 plus people. Um, uh, there was basically four artists that were featured on that day, which Eric Clapton was headlining, and then PJ Powers and Brenda Fassie and Sipho Mabuse. So those were the four acts that were booked for the day. So there was some there was some, not in a bad way, I guess, but yeah, I ended up sort of using some of Eric Clapton's gear on stage as part of something, sort of some sort of fun thing to do for me. But I didn't get to meet him, unfortunately. Again, you get to meet some of the musicians much easier in those kind of environments. So, but it was just it was a lovely day to experience with, and also being in sort of close proximity with that. With Bee Gees in Pretoria, I think they toured the country as well. And then we opened for them. It was a different band I was with at the time. We opened for them also at a rugby stadium, probably about 60,000 people plus at the time. And then, it was interesting because I couldn't really watch the Bee Gees show. I had another gig. So I really got to just see kind of, when we finished our set, you'd stay for a song or two, and then I had to make my way to the next gig. So it was really sort of a contrast to being there and then playing on that stage, and then going to an arbitrary gig somewhere in Johannesburg in a small club, But equally, very different experiences from a musical point of view.
Okay.
So yeah.
Now, what's the key, Mauritz? What's the key to adapting to such diverse genres, from jazz and pop to folk music, folk-oriented music and soundtracks, while you maintain your own identity on the guitar? By the way, what's the charm? What's the attractive element, I was going to ask you, in making music for the image others have created? Those are stories told by a film director, I don't know. How different is your approach from making your own music or working for other artists in the studio, the film music aspect?
I find it a very stimulating idea to work with other people's ideas, whether it be a story, a film, or whether it be an artist, whether it be a different genre. And so when I say music becomes faceless, I really try and honor the music primarily.
Yeah.
And so from that point of view, I say, what can I contribute to make this music speak or to make it resonate with people who will be either watching or listening or both. So that's my point of departure. You know, I think what if I do develop my own, or say have, developing my own voice or my own style or my own way of sounding in what I do, I think it's something that happens over time. You become aware of it, and then perhaps you become aware of certain characteristics of what you do, and you know what you can develop from those, and you try and enhance those. You know, I always try and find myself wanting to put my own identity in what I do anyway, whether it be regardless of what role it is. You know, if it's writing a score for film, or arranging for orchestra, or playing the guitar, or whatever the role is. You know, I really want to be able to zone in on how I feel something could sound. So I'm very much, into how does it feel for me, without disregarding other people's way of thinking, if it's their music or their project, etc. But I always try and find a balance, and it's very hard to say how you do it. It's just something that it's like part of my mantra or my way of thinking. So I just end up hopefully applying it in some way, even if it's subconsciously sometimes, perhaps. But I find myself really being aware of the idea of wanting to do that. If that makes any sense. Even though it might happen subconsciously, I'm always aware that I've said to myself, well, you know, you know, I want whatever I'm contributing has to have a little bit of me in there, and maybe, and hopefully it does anyway. But it varies a lot because of different genres, and different artists and different ways of thinking. So but it's that's part of the beauty of it almost, and the curse, at the same time. So the reason I do my own albums then is to kind of have more of a in focus snapshot of where I am, where I think bits of it comes through in other projects with people.
I myself am a big fan of music from films. I'm a big collector of original soundtracks, and I've always felt that any composers, whether they're the John Williamses or whatever, and others, they shouldn't become very destructive with what they do. They should orientate the audience and emphasize some situations and feelings, but it's not their moment of playing music. It's like accompaniment to accompany the action. So that must be difficult to balance. I mean, that's my perception as a listener.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the golden rules, whether it be a said or unsaid rule, is that story is king. So whatever helps tell the story, I think the gray areas and the challenges lie really in the interpretation of the story, and by that I mean a director's interpretation. So I mean your biggest I think for a composer to picture, you want to be on the same page, literally and figuratively, as a director, because it's and along with that, you want to have a good relationship with your director, good enough so that you can take chances, in a manner of speaking, and say, well, I may suggest something else and maybe surprise the director in a good way. But the core of it is really that the story needs to be told in a way that the director's vision would hopefully facilitate. So the best one can do as a composer, in my opinion, is, apart from that, yes, there are times where the score needs to be really understated and so on, but that everything to me is about having conversation and communication with the director of the story. Whoever makes the call, and whoever's got the end vision in sight, or has the bigger picture, no pun intended, I guess. But so from a musical point of view, you want to move in and out of that, in around, shall I say, rather, in that space. sometimes it's more challenging, sometimes it's less challenging, sometimes it happens easier because of the relationship you have with the director or the project itself or both. It varies. I think if you work with the same director all the time, obviously you're going to find a way to, because you can be familiar with the director's way of really helping you, or helping the story, or guidance, shall I say, for lack of better words.
Do you do you remember any movies that moved you particularly by the original score? Well, I have several. I could be all day talking about them, but
I have too many, I guess. I have too many, I mean, look, I love some of Hans Zimmer's work. I mean, I think he's really amazing. For me, Gladiator and Interstellar is really something to behold.
mhm.
Uh, for me, a composer, not, I mean, a lot of these composers that we listen to, they are really, really, I mean, to say at least, this is not, this is almost without wanting to deglamorize or demean any of it. I mean, they are so capable of what they're so qualified for it. They're really such gifted people, and the skill set and the experience that they acquire along the way and all that, it's just amazing. So I admire all the aspects of the process equally. But one thing that I tend to enjoy quite a lot when it comes to music for film is that the score has an identity unto itself for the movie.
Uh-huh.
Like a Gladiator isn't always a good example for that. You have a strong Lisa Gerrard influence and a strong Hans Zimmer influence. I mean, John Williams' scores are very much have an identity unto themselves for the genre and for obviously a lot of the Spielberg franchises, and you have Danny Elfman, he's got a sound, you have there's so many to mention, so I enjoy, you know, and I mean, Alexander Desplat, I think,
Yes.
I can't really say his name properly, baby. But, I enjoy his work because I think he's done some interesting, really scores which are really have an identity unto themselves for the movie. You can, you know, even with the latest release of, say, I mean, Ludwig, who did the Odyssey, which was recently released. Um, I can never, it's the surnames are tongue twisters, but um, anyway, my point being, I love the score because it was unique unto the movie,
Uh-huh.
and obviously I always go and look at the behind the scenes and see how they got to where they were. I always want to be a fly on the wall, really, when I watch these things because I'm really interested in how they get there. What is the conversation? What is the language that gets spoken until you get to that idea that really works for the director and inevitably for the story and the audience?
Look, this is the guy we were looking for. I think he's very talented. You were talking about Hans Zimmer, and some people are comparing him with Hans. I don't like comparisons, but I think this is the. Oh, sorry. This is the guy. I'm going to show you the picture in a few seconds. Here it is, I guess. Ludwig Göransson.
That's him. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's very
Yeah.
talented. Yeah.
I love his work. I think him and also Daniel Pemberton, I think, is for me really interesting talents because they kind of moving away. I can sort of hear that they're not necessarily trying to they're not trying to be a Hans Zimmer or
Hmm.
anything else, and again, if you listen to, I suppose, more recently the Odyssey score, it
Exactly.
really has an identity to the music, and whether and I think that's what always intrigues me, saying,
Yeah.
mentioning that I'd love to I would have loved to be a fly on the wall, just to hear what the conversations are,
Yeah.
right? Because I think there's so much to learn from that. You know, not just the process of, oh, how would you record this? How would this work? How would this sound musically? I mean, that's a beautiful process you know,
Uh-huh.
its own. But I think there's a lot to be said for how the language and how the conversations go, you know, along the way during the whole process, you know. And until you're there yourself, you know, it's hard to really imagine it unless you've worked with someone before or busy working with someone. You know.
Well, I have a couple more questions to finish up. Now, you've been very generous with your time. And before anything else, I'd like to show you this guy, Mauritz Lotz. Have you heard of him? This is a lovely tune that I'm not sure if you have a name for, but it's an opportunity where you were with a guitar gallery. They manufacture guitars, I guess.
Okay.
And this piece that you were playing, I think it's an improvisation, but I loved it. I really loved it. I'm not sure if it comes from an album or anything, but
Probably not.
yeah, possibly not. It's like folky. It's like a little bit new age, but it was very good. I was going to ask you, Moritz, what are some of, well, mention a couple, some pending goals versus your greatest achievements, up to date. There must be more than many. What are you, what would you like to happen next? And what is something that I said, oh, I'm so happy about that I made it, that I did it.
Well, apart from, I think I'm hoping for Duncan and myself to hopefully continue with some ideas moving forward and maybe doing something, you know, on a do a second round, you know. But there are some. I'm currently working on a project. I'm writing music for acoustic guitar and cello, just two instruments. So I'm hoping to, you know, that's specifically for a show that I want to put together for some festivals next year in and around, you know, South Africa. It's sort of kind of classical world, folky inspired, I suppose. I don't really know what you will call the style, but I'm working with the lead cellist from the Cape Town Philharmonic Orchestra on this project, which I'm really excited about. So it's a wonderful adventure for me. You know, I think in terms of musical adventures, you know, I don't think I'm going to climb the Himalayas quite soon to think, well, now I've really lived, you know. So I try and I sort of focus on musical adventures a lot in my life. Um, I love country guitar, which is a completely different thing. I mean, I'm a big fan of the style, and I grew up listening to a lot of that. And at an early stage in my professional career, I was playing a lot of the, country music in bands. So I want to. It's part of one of my bucket list things is to actually do a country guitar album with just a bass player and a drummer. You know, being very stripped down and very simple and you know, very honest, hopefully, you know. And you know, I grew up with Chet Atkins, and you know, I love Tommy Emmanuel's playing. I love there's so many guitarists that I would sort of mention, I suppose. But yeah, so I'm not comparing myself to them in the, you know, in that way, but I certainly I'd be exploring that. You know, I want to explore the concept of putting a very raw, simple country guitar album together just for fun, you know, just to be able to say, well, you know, that was a nice thing to explore. That was a nice place to go to musically. Um, I'm certainly gearing myself a lot with orchestral music at the moment. I've been writing orchestral music. Some of it is combined with it's more kind of, I suppose most of it's hybrid, classical, cinematic kind of things. Here and there, some world music influence. So I don't think I'll ever get away from that. But, you know, there's certainly for me a world of wonder still to explore, you know, in so many areas. But my love for orchestral and choral music as well, especially I would say would definitely drive me to try and have more music performed live that I would write for orchestra. So my goal is that I'm hoping to go to Europe at some point and explore some places there and opportunities there, not to live there necessarily, but also just to see if there's space. I have some people that live there and that could, that I'm hoping, I could sort of find avenues for, music to be performed, by classical ensembles or instrumental ensembles. So it's very wide, I mean, other than that, I love traveling anyway. So there are places in the world that I still want to see just for fun.
Uh-huh. Well, Chile, who knows? One day, let me show you a picture of a guy that I admire, speaking about guitar players that are legendary to me, and that I had the chance to play a lot, to airplay a lot on the radio station back in the 90s, late 80s and first half of the 90s. And it's this man who's no longer with us. I hope that Anil Prasad, a big hello to him. I'm taking this from his interviews website, which is great. Michael Hedges, he was an incredible talent, and I heard some new guys that are, I think from the same place a little bit. Callum Graham being one of them, and so maybe
there was Preston Reed as well. Do you remember Preston Reed?
Not really.
That was, I think, also 90s for me, but
okay.
But I mean, Michael Hedges, I think, in terms of his style, let alone his playing. I mean, I had heard some of his stuff back in the day. I would, listen to some of what he's doing. It's really amazing.
The Windham Hill empire, so to speak. And well, Maurice, let's tell the people where they can find your music or get your music. You have a YouTube channel that I've been showing during the conversation. There's no Bandcamp for you. Do you have a Bandcamp page? No.
I don't think I'm on Bandcamp. I mean, I probably have to double check. I don't know all,
okay.
I'm not always aware of all the platforms, I guess, but I mean, my music's distributed through the same company that's distributing Beautiful Madness album.
Okay.
So I think if you go to Spotify, possibly iTunes and some others, you will probably find my music. Go to Next Music. I don't know if they have a channel on YouTube, but you may perhaps find it. So there should be some stuff on YouTube here and there.
There is.
My website is under construction on and off, been for a while. So my apologies to whoever, but I'm still trying to really get that finalized and up to date so that it can have the right kind of information and user-friendly dynamic for people to explore. So I think those are the sort of main platforms that I can think of at the moment.
Well, this is Spotify. We have Vivaldi, the Shibumi, one of your favorite tracks from A Beautiful Madness, and you have several others that people can check out. So I suggest that everyone go there and check out the amazing work by this man, Mauritz Lotz, who has been very generous. Thank you for the interest in this meeting, and thanks Duncan for the contact. I hope that you achieve all your goals and that you really come out with amazing projects that I'm sure is what will happen, and that we will be in touch.
I appreciate it. It's been my pleasure and privilege. Thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you for the time and for this history and stories, because I've learned a lot. Thanks for the lesson.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too.